did a segment, I forget how many weeks ago or months ago now, about how David Zaslav, who's the CEO of Warner Brothers Discovery, which is fairly recent, it's been the last couple of years that Warner Brothers and Discovery merged into one giant conglomerate, how they had taken the film Batgirl that had Michael Keaton coming back as Batman, and it was pretty close to being completed, and that they had decided that they were going to lock it in a vault that no one would ever see it, and they were going to do that in order to take a tax write-off. What had slipped by me at that time was I think it was shortly thereafter. I think Batgirl was the first one, but around that same time period, there was a second film that they did that with. And it was something called Scoob's Holiday Adventure, Holiday Haunt, or Halloween Haunt.
Scooby-Doo.
It was basically an animated Scooby-Doo Halloween movie. They shelved that as well. So that was two movies that had been vaulted for tax purposes that no one was ever going to see. And the narrative that had come out at that time, or that they had tried to put out, I'm not sure about the Scooby-Doo one, but at least on the Batgirl front, they were kind of trying to have it put out like, well, the film wasn't to our level of quality, and we have to protect our intellectual property, and we care about these characters, and we can't have them. The studio that released Batman and Robin was saying, we care so much about the Bat family that we cannot besmirch them by having this film released as streaming services, even though we've already paid for it. So that was bad enough, but that was bad enough when that was a one-off. In the past week, there has been a raging controversy, and I gathered when I brought this up to you earlier today via text message that this was not something that had really crossed your radar. And I was curious as to whether or not it had or hadn't before I pitched it as something to discuss. There is another film that is completed, 100% done. It had gone out to test screenings. It had John Cena in it, which is neither here nor there, but I thought it was an interesting coincidence.
No, I think it's a here.
I think it's a here. He's a name. Yeah.
I love John
Lana
Cena.
Condor is in it, which apparently this would be the second project she was in that Warner Brothers decided to throw away the key, so she's got awful luck, which, I mean, that just sucks. But anyway, John Cena stars in it. It is a film that was called Coyote versus Acme. I had not heard of this film until this made air as to what Warner Brothers was planning on doing. It had tested very well in the 90%, like 90 something, which for test audiences is
amazing. That's great.
That's amazing. Like,
yeah.
Top Gun Maverick didn't, I think, test as high as Coyote versus Acme in its initial test screenings, and look how well that did. It was a hybrid live action animated film. The comparison that I have heard made from people who have seen it have said it's similar to Roger Rabbit in that way, that type of style, and that it has done it as the best since any movie since Roger Rabbit, and that this film is legitimate. This film is phenomenal. And now Warner Brothers, specifically David Zaslav, has said, we are going to take a $30 million tax write-off, and we are not going to release this film. And this had caused other distributors, Amazon, I believe, was the big one, that had said, look, we are aware of the word of mouth on this film. We will buy it off of you. We will pay you probably more than what you will make in the tax write-off,
right,
in order to let us release this film. Warner Brothers and Zaslav, no, we are not going to do that. The backlash has been so severe, and I'm not talking about public backlash, which I think David Zaslav could really give a shit about at this point. The backlash from higher-ups in the industry that Warner Brothers would like to do business with in the future have thrown such a justified fit about this that now Warner Brothers has pulled a U-turn and said, we are open to selling it to someone else that would like to distribute. Last I heard, at the time of this recording, Amazon was still possibly a front runner. They were doing screenings for potential buyers on the lot, I believe, this week. Warner Brothers appears to not be in the film industry anymore.
Right.
And that is what prompted Christopher Nolan to leave the studio after a very lucrative relationship with them. And this ties back to another clip I sent you just conversationally between you and I as friends a couple days ago, where Nolan was talking about the death of physical media, something you and I are very passionate about. But he had talked about Oppenheimer coming to Blu-ray. And as part of that conversation, he had also talked about how in a post-pandemic world, when major studios had turned to streaming as their primary priority and that theatrical distribution was no longer considered a concern, that he was worried about the actual future of the art form. And he was thinking that that was a very short-term vision for what would become a very long-term problem. It was that disagreement that prompted him to leave Warner Brothers, and Oppenheimer was his first film under his new deal with Universal, which worked out pretty well for Universal. And now you had other major film makers saying, why would I ever make a film with Warner Brothers ever again when there's no guarantee that they will ever actually release a film?
Right.
I thought this was worth talking about. This is where Wall Street has infected Hollywood, and Hollywood has always had a questionable ethics as far as how crew are treated, how the workers who make the thing that they are profiting off of are treated. But this is a new level to it, or a new angle to it, where you have one of the premier, in theory, movie studios in the world that in the last couple years has infuriated Christopher Nolan, that has infuriated all of these other creative people in a creative industry, to where now they are saying, I do not want to make my project at Warner Brothers. If I have any other option, I will make it somewhere else. And that is directly because of the profits before anywhere else mindset of David Zaslav, who, again, when Warner Brothers and Discovery merged, he took home something like 200 some million dollars in annual compensation that year. And then he said the writers in the writer strike were being unrealistic and their hopes and expectations for compensation. It's a dumpster fire. Jason, childhood is dead. Your thoughts?
It really pisses me off, Dave. The whole thing pisses me off. We are actually in the midst right now, and this year and in the years following. And listen, I know a lot of you out there say, Jesus Christ, this is the most depressing, negative podcast that's ever been, yet you can't turn away, can you, dozens? But it's
Happy
true.
Holidays.
Happy holidays. Here's the thing. We are in the absolute death spiral of what has been known as the entertainment industry and the movie industry. I wish I could say that the shit fit that everybody is throwing about Warner Brothers caring more about money and tax write-offs more than the creative vision and the forethought put into the distribution of the projects that they should be funding is going to end. It is not going to end. This is the beginning of the fucking end.